A shootout erupts tonight on the city's east side, sending several people to the hospital. And Southern Baptists choose a new leader in the closest vote in its history. I'm Alan Himberger. Lori is off tonight. Coverage of these stories and more coming up next.
San Antonio Spirit on board.
From the hill country to the Rio Grande. Live from the heart of Texas. This is News 4 San Antonio at 10.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Our top story, authorities say an East Side shooting spree tonight may have been triggered by a drug deal that went sour. Witnesses say it all began in front of an East Side bar. Apparently, some men just began shooting. Several cars were hit, and at least one woman was rushed by EMS to the hospital. Now, apparently, she was sitting in the car in front of the bar, and after getting hit by the bullet, her boyfriend then drove her to a liquor store and called an ambulance. Witnesses say that she wasn't the only one hit by the bullets. Police say that they heard that several people had been shot and that friends or relatives had driven those victims to the hospital, not by EMS. Authorities are still looking for the people responsible for this shooting. Meantime, 2 men in jail tonight following a bank robbery that happened on the city's west side. Police say 25-year-old Mario Lozano entered this bank about noon today, showed a gun to a teller, and asked for money. His getaway was foiled when a red dye explosive went off in the money bag. Police later picked him up at his home. They were a little bit confused. They thought Lozano was a woman.
We're saying that the person that we believe is a very good suspect on the robbery is in the house and is a female impersonator, according to his or her admittance.
33-year-old Rick Pacheco, allegedly Lozano's lover, was also arrested, both men being held without bail tonight. Arson investigators are saying tonight that they are much closer to finding whoever it was who started a fire at Santa Rosa Hospital Thursday night. As you may recall, arson is suspected in that late-night fire, which caused the evacuation of some 77 patients. Arson investigators told us tonight several items found on the second-floor pantry area where the fire started are being carefully looked at. Investigators have interviewed several employees and patients, and they think they have a suspect. More than $750,000 in damage was done during the 35 minutes that it took firefighters to get that blaze at Santa Rosa under control. Well, the chief of police says today that he thinks most of the Alamo area's anti-crime plan, first unveiled yesterday by local law enforcement officials, can be in place by next year. Chief Bill Gibson says budget allotments already in place will make it possible to invest some $5 million in an enhanced anti-crime package next year. The mayor says taxes may have to be raised to help fund the plan, but Gibson said that won't be necessary. And the police department is already making extensive plans.
That does not mean that we can let up on our effort to those current abusers and the drug trafficking. We must attack that as well, and we're planning to do that. But as I say, I think the long-range solution is education.
Mayor Henry Cisneros says the anti-crime package could be used to get additional federal funding for crime-fighting programs. He also said FBI Chief William Sessions is looking for a model crime-fighting city. Today, Chief Gibson says he believes programs could be in place for those funds by sometime next year. Well, signs of political lines were evident today when San Antonio's 40,000 visiting Baptists cast their votes. For the 9th year in a row, a conservative was elected to head the Baptist organization. However, as Art Rascone tells us, the margin of victory was the closest in history.
It began as a religious revival. It was the spiritual lift the 40,000 Baptists were waiting for. But the songs of praise and emotional outpouring faded when the religious retreat turned into a show of political might. The outgoing conservative president blasted the moderate faction.
When somebody tells me that I must underwrite his liberalism or be branded a non-Baptist, I am saying to him that he's trying to force his beliefs on me, and I don't want it.
The strong words may have swayed the undecided. The conservative wing clinched the election with just over 50% of the vote.
50.53%.
But the result did not draw cheers from liberal Baptists. To them, it's a definite step in the wrong direction.
I was disappointed that Mr. Vines was elected. I'm definitely for Mr. Jackson because I believe he's hope for unity.
We're not going to have healing now. It's going to be more division, more problem.
But the president-elect is set on healing the denomination's wounds.
I would hope that this could be the beginning of a renewed effort on the part of Southern Baptist to stay about the business which we have placed as our priority.
The conservatives may have squeaked by in this election, but it's obvious the battle for control is not over. In the words of one prominent Baptist leader, a split between conservatives and moderates is eventually inevitable. Art Rascon, News 4, San Antonio.
Now, those 40,000 Baptist messengers, as they're called, brought an estimated 18,000 cars with them to San Antonio, but neither they nor their cars seem to be a real problem this morning. San Antonio traffic cops were out in force, ready to handle the massive problems many had predicted for this first day of the convention, but those problems just never materialized.
Well, the traffic was heavier than normal and a lot more pedestrian traffic, but it wasn't really that bad as we expected it to be.
Now, it turns out most of the convention's messengers had walked to the convention center or had taken the bus from park and ride locations like Crossroads or Windsor Park malls. The only real problems that did come about, as predicted, parking spaces were taken up very early in the day. Police tonight are looking for a hit-and-run driver that killed a 43-year-old Houston woman in our city. A passing motorist found Celia Salinas' body early this morning. Police say the woman had been hit by a car that apparently had been trying to exit I-10 at the roll-and exit. Medical examiner's office says the woman had been dead for several hours after she was found. Defense attorneys for accused baby killer Ray Macias still trying to convince a judge that their client just can't get a fair trial here in San Antonio. Macias wheeled into court again today wearing street clothes this time instead of the jail uniform he's usually seen in. Members of the local media testified today about the extent of coverage in this case. Macias is charged with last December's beating death of his 8-month-old niece, Sarah. Well, is Texas out of the running for that $4.4 billion super collider project? According to a published report in Tennessee, it is. Reports citing unnamed sources in a Nashville newspaper say the sites have been reduced to Tennessee, Illinois, and North Carolina. However, the Energy Department tonight says this report is not true and that none of the 7 sites, including Texas, has been removed from any list. And in a blaze of yellow flame and a billow of smoke, a redesigned booster rocket was put through another test firing today. This time the test took place in the Utah desert. It's the next to last test needed to qualify major design features before space shuttle flights can resume. The shuttle program grounded, as you know, after a booster rocket leak destroyed the Challenger in 1986. NASA is hoping to launch the shuttle Discovery this year on August the 31st. A fraud and bribery investigation by the FBI starts at the Pentagon. We'll have more on that. And drought conditions across the Midwest have the Mississippi River approaching an all-time low. FBI agents found out across the United States today in a huge fraud and bribery investigation. Armed with search warrants, investigators went through files at the Pentagon and 30 other locations in a dozen states. The massive search stems from a 2-year investigation of alleged fraud and bribery involving major defense contractors. The offices of 2 of the Pentagon's top officials for buying military equipment were reportedly sealed off and searched. So far, no one has been charged with any crimes. The White House Chief of Staff surprised everyone today when he announced that he would be stepping down. Former Senator Howard Baker says he is leaving because of the ill health of his wife and also his stepmother. Baker will be replaced by his Deputy Chief of Staff, Kenneth Duberstein. Baker's announcement had prompted speculation that he may be asked to be George Bush's running mate in the fall. Baker says he's really not interested, but would not turn the job down if Mr. Bush offered. Well, it looks like OPEC is going to be sending out the same amount of oil as it has in previous months. OPEC oil ministers today deciding to extend their output agreement for 6 months. Now, the ministers had argued over whether to extend the production pact by 3 or 6 months. The one problem still in the way is that Iraq is refusing to sign the deal. It claims their quota is smaller than Iran's. And Wall Street spent this day celebrating, and why not? The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 25 points to its highest level since the October crash. Today's rise was fueled by favorable trade deficit reports. Commerce Department says the trade imbalance dipped below $10 billion in April, and that's a 15% dip from the figures from March. Well, if you have some cowboy boots you want to sell to the Chinese, maybe a Rambo t-shirt that you'd like to send to Sweden, there is now a new organization in San Antonio that can help you do that. It is the new World Trade Center that just opened. Its director says it has one goal in mind: to market Texas products in 42 countries, beginning with Mexico and winding up with China, plus all others in between. And it's all done through a network of computers. And right now, everything Texas is hot.
Interested in our foods and our belt buckles and other products that we haven't traditionally thought about exporting. If we're talking about trade deficits and needing to overcome the trade deficits, then we've got to start looking at everybody in the country who's producing things that they can export.
However, it's not going to be cheap to join the World Trade Center. The average fee is $250. If you'd like more information, call the World Trade Center. There's the telephone number, 225-5877. Agriculture officials praying for rain tonight as the Mississippi River dips to a dangerously low level. And as a result, barge traffic along the river is becoming hazardous, and it's even threatening the nation's food supply. Over the last 10 days, about 18 barges have run their loads aground. In Washington, the Senate Agricultural Committee called for an emergency hearing today.
It has deteriorated to a point where it's the worst that it's been as of early June since 1934.
Officials say the low water conditions will affect the supply side of the food picture quickly. In fact, food prices have already gone up in the supermarket. And our own hot weather isn't doing much for the South Texas drought. John Willing will have his forecast. And rains may not be coming, but officials say Ramses 2 is. Just looking at some of John's weather records here, extremely warm day for portions of the Northeast, I guess.
They're getting a head start on their summer. 99 degrees up there in the northeastern part of the country.
In Newark?
Newark, New Jersey. Yeah. Ooh. Boy, that's hot weather.
That's unusual.
That's what we were seeing last Thursday, if you remember. Boy. Anyway, it's nice to see that we're not getting that kind of heat outside right now, though you can tell that the dry conditions are continuing. It is humid at 65%, but that humidity is not helping as far as rain goes. 81%, 81 degrees for the current temperature. Winds out of the southeast at 13, and the barometer has been rising. 30.15 is the current reading. Here with highs across the state today, 93 degrees in San Antonio, 91 up here in Dallas, and also in Houston at the Intercontinental Airport, and at Brownsville, 91 degrees too, so that's pretty common temperature. Look up there in the Panhandle with all the cloud cover, only 81 degrees up there in the Amarillo area. Laredo had the state's hottest temperature today with 101 degrees. As we look at the satellite picture, you can see the story. Over West Texas, all the rain has been falling. They've had about an inch of rain from Marfa all the way up here through the far western sections of the state, and it's been very, very nice for them to see the rain. Why can't it all move over here? There's a big high pressure cell which is sitting here to the northeast of us, and it's influencing the weather here, and I'll look at that in just a second and show you why it's been happening that way. 9 o'clock temperatures show the 80s and some 60s still continuing over the Panhandle area, so it's a fairly warm and a humid night over us right now. Radar is showing some heavy thunderstorm cells here over the Panhandle areas and over northwest Texas. That's a pretty good thunderstorm in progress, although it is not severe and we're not hearing any warnings about it. They have had some small hail from these storms. Larger hailstones have been falling up in upper Minnesota. There they've been seeing in Rochester, Minnesota, hailstones about 1.5 inches in diameter, and in some of the areas, especially Wheeler, Minnesota, they had 2 inches of rain. Very welcome rains coming across this area, but it's not quite enough. The radar is showing just a few scattered showers still continuing. A few are over the far western states, and here in the northeast, where it's very hot, it is also very dry. You can not even see any clouds. Now there's a low pressure sitting over northern Minnesota, and a front comes straight on down from that into central Kansas and Oklahoma. That front has been bringing some strong wind gusts. In the thunderstorms in Minnesota, they've been seeing wind gusts of 60 miles an hour. But see that high pressure there? That's just what's going on at the surface. In the higher atmosphere, if we were to go up about halfway and then look down on everything, all the pressure lines would look something like this. A big, sizzling high pressure sitting right here in the eastern United States. There's a weak low pressure sitting out here offshore, but that's not helping anything. It's this big high which is influencing the weather so much, and obviously it's not bringing any new rain to the Mississippi River Valley areas. Now what you end up with a high pressure cell like this, you end up with a flow that goes around clockwise in this area, and then around this high pressure you can see another clockwise flow. Where those two come together, the influence of the high is very weak, so you get moist air there, but underneath the high and all the way out here to these edges, it's very dry, so most of these areas of the country are quite dry, and it's probably going to stay that way. There's no big pattern change coming our way. The forecast is for fair skies tonight, fair to partly cloudy, lows dropping to 72 degrees, and we'll be seeing quite a few clouds in the morning, partly cloudy to cloudy, temperatures in the mid-70s and southeast winds continuing, but by the afternoon it will break out some, highs getting to about 93 degrees, which is what we saw today, winds out of the southeast at 10 to 15. Thursday again is partly cloudy, highs up to 93 degrees, but the morning low a little bit cooler, 68, and there's the extended. Do you see any big changes? No, it's about the same all the way through. Low 70s and low 90s.
We're stuck there.
I'm afraid so.
Typical summertime in San Antonio. Thanks a lot, John. Well, the Pharaoh who chased Moses and the Israelites to the Red Sea will soon be on display on the banks of the San Antonio River. At least that was the consensus of the key players in the deal who met this afternoon to coordinate their plans. The Ramses II exhibit is already playing to packed houses in other parts of the country. San Antonio and Dallas were competing for the chance to host the exhibit for its last stop. Well, today, San Antonio's negotiators were anxious to remove any lingering doubts that our city has won that competition.
That we do have a signed agreement signed by the three key figures in Egypt who have the authority to make this exhibition available to San Antonio.
Displaying the exhibit at the San Antonio Museum of Art could cost up to $2 million. The mayor says it's a tough time to collect donations, but he says San Antonio can count on donors throughout the state of Texas to chip in. The exhibit is supposed to open in San Antonio April 1st of next year. In sports tonight, George will update us on Game 4 of the NBA Finals, and he's also going to show you what kind of impact Larry Brown has already had on the Spurs. I know you want to talk about the finals first, but I think it's very interesting that the Spurs set a franchise record the first day or second day of Larry Brown's reign.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but as I said, at 5 o'clock, I called down there today to get an update on how ticket sales were going, and whose voice comes on the phone? Larry Brown's. A
Even
recording
the phone,
saying somebody will be with you in just a minute. For $700,000, I guess you get them to do anything, right? Anyhow, we're going to go talk about the NBA Finals first tonight. You know, the Lakers lead the series over the Pistons 2-1, and that word pivotal, it gets overused a lot, but I think it really applies tonight in Detroit. The Pistons had beaten the Lakers in L.A. in Game 1, but then they took them for granted. They lost in Game 3 in Detroit. A loss again in Detroit tonight. You could just about hand the trophy to the Lakers. Let's check and see how it's going. It doesn't look like the Lakers are going to win this one. Detroit up by 17 in the fourth quarter with about 6 minutes left. Isaiah Thomas is playing hurt, but he is playing, and Game 5 will come up Thursday in Detroit. The Spurs wasted no time putting Larry Brown to work. Yesterday, the media got its shot at him, and today the fans got theirs. Our Randy Sparagi joined in a special brown bag lunch at North Star Mall.
Lunch with Larry was a huge success. The mayor was there, former Spur greats were there, of course, Red was there, and more importantly, a huge gathering was there.
Larry is very, very impressed with this.
He should be.
Well, he is. He said, gosh, he said, this is like a huge college town. So that's the kind of reaction that he has from what's happening here.
Larry should have felt right at home today. Not only were there grown men sporting Kansas Jayhawk shirts, there were also young ladies showing their true colors.
We moved here about 6 weeks ago from Lawrence.
Really? So Larry Brown kind of followed you then?
Well, our phone rang about 10 times last night and said, did Larry Brown follow you? And we said, we hope so.
Coach Brown had to feel good about today's brown bag affair, even though he took a little ribbing. Many years ago, the coach said the only good thing about San Antonio was the guacamole. Well, today he got two good things, a guacamole salad and a show of support from Spurs fans. I'm Randy Sparagi, Sports 4, San Antonio.
And then later this afternoon, Randy headed over to the Spurs ticket office where he found out the Brown Blitz is definitely working.
It's a record day to for our record keeping as far back as we can date, and we've sold over 75 new full season tickets today alone. So sales are just going fantastic.
Previous best in a single day was just a couple of weeks ago when Red bought the team. They sold 49 that day. Baseball scores tonight. Cincinnati beating the Astros this evening. Pittsburgh continues to beat up on the Cubs. Another win today. 6-3 was the final. Montreal beat Philadelphia in the first of two, but the Phils lead the second game in the seventh inning. New York shutting out the St. Louis Cardinals tonight. And Fernando beat the Atlanta Braves for the 17th time in his career this evening. 5-4 was the final. Over in the American League, Texas and California, very early right now is in the third to update what you see on your screen. Detroit beat Baltimore. Tom Brookins, a grand slam and 6 RBIs as the Tigers beat the Orioles tonight. Toronto edging Cleveland, the Twins beating the White Sox. Milwaukee leads Seattle in the ninth, at last word we have, and Boston beat New York tonight 7-3. Here's good news for you Mission fans. The Mission's clinching a tie for the first half division championship in the Texas League, and under league rules, that guarantees a playoff spot at the end of the season. So congrats to Kevin Kennedy and his Missions tonight. Quickly, former Olympic hockey coach Herb Brooks and his entire staff fired by the Minnesota North Stars today. Pittsburgh Penguins also fired their coach, Pierre Kramer, out after just one season. Denver Nuggets coach Doug Moe saying he was quoted out of context in a story that said he might leave Denver when his contract expires. Just isn't so, he says. And Charles Barkley, one of those little cut-ins that CBS does, he said tonight, surprising everybody, I will not be back in Philadelphia next year. He's not a free agent or anything. He just says he doesn't want to come back. He doesn't like it there.
Let's get him on the phone.
Red,
got a great coach.
Red, you get his phone number? Get to it.
Yeah. But Larry Brown will not be wearing the Coyote uniform, though. He'll do anything for the team except wear the Coyote uniform,
as far as we know.
Or sell popcorn. Flags ripple across the country and in San Antonio as we salute a special birthday. That story when we come back. And finally tonight, a Texas-sized salute to Flag Day. It took 20 employees of the Dixie Flag Company to carry a special flag to the pole where it's going to be waving for 24 hours a day, every day. Special ceremonies were held honoring the 211th birthday of our nation's flag and the 30th anniversary of the Dixie Flag Company. Now, this giant flag measures 30 feet wide by 50 feet long. It'll fly from a special 100-foot pole. You can see it at Dixie's company offices on the Pan Am Expressway. Pan Am Expressway. Wake up weather?
Well, we got a lot of clouds coming in and higher humidity. It will probably look threatening in the morning, and shower chances are pretty small. Though.
And a record for the Spurs?
Record 75 season tickets sold today as of 4:30. So that's the best we've ever done.
Outstanding. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
News 4 San Antonio has been brought to you in part by the Train Company. 50 million people take comfort in it.